She cared for the injured cowboy. By morning, he said, "I ain't leaving you ever again." The storm had been raging for hours over Pine Hollow. Snow fell thick as wool, swallowing fences, burying the path to town, and pressing hard against the windows of Martha Ellery's small homestead. The lantern light inside her barn flickered, fighting against the wind that moaned through the gaps in the boards. Martha was used to silence, used to the loneliness that followed since her husband's death the winter before. She moved slowly, stacking wood near the stove, her hands red and raw from the cold. Outside, the horses shifted uneasily, sensing something in the storm that she could not yet see. Then came the sound, faint at first, like something heavy dragged through the snow. She froze, listening. Another sound, closer now, a groan, low and pained. She lifted the lantern and stepped toward the barn door, heart thudding beneath her wool coat. When she pulled the door open, the wind tore it from her hand. Snow blew in hard, nearly snuffing out the light. There, half buried near the corral, lay a man. He was slumped against the fence, hat gone, coat torn, his body half covered in white. Martha's breath caught. She ran to him. His face was pale beneath the frost, his lips cracked and bleeding. She turned him over and saw the blood on his side, dark and half frozen. "Good Lord," she whispered. With effort, she dragged him inside, laying him near the fire pit. His gun belt fell loose, heavy with a revolver. She hesitated, then pushed it aside and reached for a blanket. When she peeled off his coat, she found a torn shirt and a bullet wound along his ribs. Not fresh, but angry red from infection. He stirred, mumbling words she couldn't make out. She pressed a cloth to the wound, cleaned it with what little whiskey she had, and prayed the bleeding would stop. Hours passed before he opened his eyes. They were gray, sharp, and untrusting. He tried to sit up, but she pushed him gently back. "Don't move," she said. "You'll tear it open again." He blinked at her, confused. "Where am I?" "My barn," she answered. "You stumbled in out of the storm." His hand twitched, looking for the revolver, but she had already moved it beyond reach. "You're safe here," she said softly. "Least till the weather breaks." He studied her face, suspicion slowly giving way to exhaustion. "Name's Caleb," he muttered, his voice rough. "Martha Ellery." She poured him a little water and helped him drink. He winced as he shifted. "Didn't mean to bring trouble to your door." Her eyes flicked toward the gun on the floor. "What kind of trouble?" He didn't answer. The storm howled outside like it meant to tear the roof away. She saw then the edge of fear in him. Real, deep fear. Not the kind man gets from pain, but the kind that comes from being hunted. She had seen the wanted posters in town last week. A man's face half-shadowed, the name Caleb Rourke. Reward $100. Accused of robbing the stagecoach and killing a deputy. And now here he was, lying on her floor. Martha's breath came shallow. She rose quietly, walked to the window. Beyond the curtain of snow, she saw nothing but white. No riders. No torches. Yet. She looked back at the stranger, his chest rising slowly beneath the blanket. He didn't look like a killer, but she'd long since learned looks could lie. Still, something in her, some part not yet hardened by grief, kept her from throwing him out into the storm. She knelt beside him once more and pulled the blanket higher. "Rest," she said. "Whatever you done, it can wait till morning." He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. The firelight flickered across his face, softening the sharp lines of a life hard-lived. Martha sat back, watching the flames dance. Outside, the wind began to quiet, and the snow fell more slowly, gentler. Inside, two strangers shared the same small warmth, neither sure what morning would bring. Morning came slowly over Pine Hollow, pale light pushing through the cracks in the barn walls. The storm had passed, leaving a thick white silence across the land. The snow shimmered like glass, untouched and cold. Martha woke stiff from sleeping in the chair beside the fire. For a moment she forgot the man lying near the hearth. Then she heard the low sound of his breathing and remembered everything. The storm, the wound, his name. Caleb Rourke. She rose quietly and checked the bandage. The bleeding had stopped, but the skin around the wound was swollen and angry. He stirred when she touched it, a faint groan leaving his lips. "You'll live," she murmured. His eyes blinked open, still cloudy from pain. "You should have left me there," he said, voice hoarse. "I don't leave men to die in the snow," she replied simply. He looked around, studying the barn, the rough timbers, the feed sacks, the two horses watching from their stalls. "You alone out here?" Martha hesitated, then nodded. "Been that way for nearly a year." His gaze softened just a little. "Sorry." She poured a cup of broth from the pot by the fire. "Eat what you can. It'll help." He tried to sit, wincing as he took the cup from her hands. "You're kind," he said quietly. "But you don't know who I am." "I know enough," she answered, folding her arms. "A man half dead in a blizzard shot through the ribs doesn't need more enemies." Caleb gave a dry laugh. "Maybe not, still. You might think differently once you hear my name in town. I already have." That made him look up quickly. "Then why'd you help me?" She held his stare a moment. "Because I don't believe every word the sheriff tells." The wind outside picked up again, shaking loose bits of frost from the roof. Martha turned away, busying herself with feeding the horses. Caleb watched her. Watched the quiet way she moved, careful but steady, like a woman who'd carried too much weight for too long. When she came back, she sat by the fire again, keeping a small distance. "They say you robbed a stagecoach," she said softly, "and shot a deputy." Caleb's jaw tightened. "They say a lot of things. I was on the coach, sure, but not robbing it. I was guarding it. I used to ride security for Wells Fargo. That night someone hit us from behind, two men, both masked. They killed the deputy and took a ledger from the safe. When the posse found me, I was the only one left standing. They didn't want to listen." "A ledger?" Martha asked. He nodded. "Book of debts. Names, numbers, money owed to the freight company. But I think it held more than that. One of the robbers spoke a name I recognized, your husband's." The room went still. Martha's throat felt tight. "My husband?" "Eli Ellery," Caleb said. "He used to deal horses down in Deadwood, right?" "I heard his name when the masked man shouted. Said something about getting Eli's cut. Then they knocked me cold." Martha stared at the fire, her face pale. "My husband died last winter," she whispered. "Fell through the ice crossing Red Creek, that's what they said." Caleb's voice softened. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I truly am. But that ledger, if I can find it, it'll prove who set me up. Maybe your husband got caught in something he couldn't get out of." Martha rose, walking to the window. Outside, the snow blinded her eyes. Her heart pounded, torn between grief and disbelief. Eli, a thief, a liar? She couldn't picture it. Yet the words rang true in Caleb's voice, heavy and sorrowful. She turned back to him. "You think whoever framed you might come here?" "Maybe," he said. "They'd figure I'd head for shelter. And if they knew Eli, they'd know this place." Martha drew a slow breath. "Then you'd best heal fast, Mr. Rourke. Trouble's not far behind." Caleb gave a faint nod. "You could still turn me in. The sheriff'd pay good money." She met his eyes. "Money's not worth a man's life. Not anymore." For a long while neither spoke. The only sound was the faint crackle of the fire and the restless breath of the horses. Outside, the snow began to melt from the eaves, dripping steadily and slowly. The storm had passed, but another kind was already building, one that would test both their hearts before the thaw was through. By the next day, the sun was bright over Pine Hollow, turning the snow into a glittering sea. Smoke rose thin from Martha's chimney, curling up into the still air. The quiet might have seemed peaceful to someone passing by, but inside the barn there was a weight to it, a waiting tension neither Martha nor Caleb spoke about. Caleb had managed to sit up that morning. He was pale but stronger, the color returning to his cheeks. He watched Martha move about, fixing feed for the horses, checking his bandages, and pouring warm water into a basin. "You work like you don't get tired," he said. She gave a small smile. "I learned not to show it." Your husband, Eli, he must have been a lucky man. Her hands paused just for a moment. He was kind, she said softly, when he wasn't restless. Always wanted more than this little patch of land could give. Caleb nodded slowly. That kind of wanting can get a man in trouble. She didn't answer, just wrung out a cloth and dabbed his side. The wound was healing, but infection still lingered. You'll live, she said. Didn't expect to, he murmured. Figured the snow would bury me by morning. It nearly did, she said. But God wasn't done with you yet. Caleb studied her face, plain, steady, marked with quiet strength. You always talk like that? Like what? Like you still believe. She looked away. Belief's about all I've got left. For a time there was only the crackle of fire and the drip of melting snow. Then Martha stood. I need to fetch wood from the shed. You stay put, he gave a half smile. Don't think I'll be running far. Outside, the air bit cold against her skin. The storm had stripped the trees bare, their branches heavy with frost. Martha gathered wood, her mind spinning over Caleb's words. Her husband's name, that ledger, the masked men. Could it be true? Could Eli have been part of something dark? A sound broke her thoughts, the faint crunch of hooves on packed snow. She froze, listening. Voices carried over the wind, low, male, close. Her heart jumped. She set down the wood and peered around the shed. 2 riders. Badges glinted on their coats. Deputies. Martha walked out slowly, trying to seem calm. Morning, sirs. Morning, ma'am, the older deputy said, tipping his hat. His face was wind-burned, his eyes sharp. The sheriff sent us ahead. Have you seen any travelers come through last night? Storm caught a wanted man. Caleb Rourke. Armed and dangerous. Martha kept her face still. No one came this way. The storm was too thick for anyone to travel. The deputy studied her a moment. That's so? You're Eli Ellery's widow, ain't you? Yes. Good man, your husband. Shame what happened to him. His gaze flicked toward the barn. Mind if we take a look around? Just to be sure? Her stomach twisted. Ain't much to see, she said quickly. Just stock and tools, he smiled thinly. Won't take but a minute. Martha's hands gripped her coat. You can look. But my stock's nervous after the storm. Don't spook them. He nodded, motioning to his partner. They dismounted and walked toward the barn. Martha followed, trying to steady her breath. As she reached the door, she caught Caleb's eye through the small side window. He was already reaching for his gun. She shook her head hard, a small gesture begging him to stay still. The deputies stepped inside. The younger one sniffed. Smells like someone has been burning whiskey for medicine. Got sick stock, Martha said quickly. Had to clean a wound on my mare. The older deputy walked slowly toward the fire, glancing at the blanket, the basin, the water. He looked back at her. You sure you've been alone? Yes, she said, forcing a steady tone. He held her gaze for a long second, then nodded. All right. Sheriff's riding north. We'll check the ridge. He stepped past her, mounting his horse. If you see anything, tracks, smoke, send word. I will, she said. The men rode off, their figures fading into the white distance. Martha stood there long after they were gone, her breath fogging in the cold. When she finally stepped inside, Caleb was leaning back against the wall, gun still in his hand. You lied for me, he said quietly. I did, she answered. Now you'd better make it worth it. He holstered the revolver. I will. Outside, the sound of hooves faded, but both of them knew the law would be back. And next time they'd come with more than questions. That night the wind changed. It carried a colder edge, sharp as a knife, and with it came the uneasy feeling that the quiet wouldn't last. Inside the barn, Martha added another log to the fire. The flames flared up, throwing light over the walls and across Caleb's face. He looked stronger now, sitting upright, his shoulders straight, the shadows under his eyes fading. But his expression was tight, unreadable. You didn't have to lie for me, he said again, his voice low. I know. You could have told them, would have made your life simpler. Martha stirred the pot of stew, not meeting his eyes. Simple doesn't always mean right. He studied her for a long moment. Why'd you do it? She sighed. Because I've been lied about too. After Eli died, folks said things that I'd driven him to it, that I'd cursed him somehow. You hear enough talk like that? You stop trusting what people say. Caleb leaned back quiet. The crackle of the fire filled the silence between them. After a while, Martha spoke again. That ledger you mentioned? What's in it that could clear your name? Proof, he said. It showed money taken from freight runs over the last year, big sums. Someone was skimming and it wasn't me. When the robbery happened, that book vanished. If I can find it, I can show who the real thief is. She nodded slowly. And you think Eli was mixed up in it? He hesitated. I don't know for sure, but one of the masked men said his name. Maybe he owed them, maybe he helped. Either way, someone used his name to cover their trail. Martha looked down, her throat tight. The thought twisted in her chest. Eli, her husband, part of something crooked? She wanted to believe it wasn't true, but the unease in her gut said otherwise. Where would the ledger be now? She asked. Could be anywhere, Caleb said. But if your husband was part of it, maybe he hid it before he died. She frowned, thinking. Eli kept a lockbox. Said it held his contracts, bills, and savings. I haven't opened it since. Caleb's eyes lifted. Where is it? In the cellar. He shifted as if to stand, but pain stopped him halfway. Martha caught his shoulder. You stay put. I'll look. She took a lantern and crossed into the house. The floorboards creaked under her boots. The cellar door groaned open, breathing out cold, damp air. Down below she found the old lockbox under a pile of tools. It was heavy, made of oak and iron, the key still hanging from the latch. Her hands trembled as she turned it. Inside were folded papers, deeds, receipts, and beneath them something wrapped in oilcloth. She unrolled it carefully, a book, small, bound in brown leather. On the cover, a faded mark, W.F. Freight Co. Her heart jumped. She flipped it open. Names, dates, payments. But some lines were marked through, others written in a hurried hand, all leading to one name near the bottom, Sheriff Hal Briggs. Martha's breath caught. The sheriff, the very man hunting Caleb. Her hand shook as she turned the pages. There it was again. Briggs's name beside missing shipments, amounts paid out to unknown parties. It wasn't Eli who'd stolen from the company, it was the sheriff himself. She closed the book fast, heart hammering. Eli must have found out. Maybe that's why he'd been accidentally killed crossing the creek. When she returned to the barn, her face was pale.
Caleb looked up, concern flashing in his eyes.
You found something. She nodded and handed him the ledger. It's all here, she whispered. Names, amounts, and the sheriff's tied up in every one of them. Caleb opened the book and scanned the pages, his jaw tightening. So that's it. He framed me to bury his own tracks. Martha's voice shook. And my husband must have known. Maybe he tried to warn someone. Then Briggs made sure he didn't, Caleb said grimly. She sank onto the stool beside him. They'll be back, Caleb. When they find you alive, they'll come harder. He nodded slowly. Then we'll be ready. For the first time, she didn't feel alone in the fight. The fear was still there, but beside it was something else. Resolve. Outside, the moon rose pale over the frozen fields. The snow glittered under its light, calm and cold, like the silence before a storm breaks. The next day dawned quiet and gray. A thin mist hung over Pine Hollow, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Inside the barn, the fire had burned low. Martha fed it carefully, adding small pieces of kindling. Caleb sat near the doorway, a blanket draped over his shoulders. He looked stronger now, though the wound still ached. His eyes followed the horizon beyond the snow, alert, waiting. Posse won't stay gone long, he said quietly. Briggs will want to finish what he started. Martha poured him some coffee. He won't find that easy. Caleb smiled faintly. You don't scare easily, do you? Lost too much already to start now. She sat beside him, holding her cup in both hands. The steam curled between them. For a long time neither spoke. Outside, a crow called from a distant tree. Finally, Caleb said, "That ledger changes everything. But we can't just hand it over. Not unless we've got proof beyond it. Witnesses, something that ties Briggs straight to the money." Martha frowned. "There's a man in town, Sam Dilly. Used to keep the freight ledgers before Eli took over some runs. He might know what's missing." Caleb nodded. "If I can talk to him, I can prove Briggs is lying." "You can't go into town," Martha said. "Your face is on every post." "Then maybe you can." She looked at him sharply. "You're asking me to walk into Briggs' own town with that book in my pocket?" He gave a small nod. "Not the whole book. Just one page, the one with his name and the dates. Bring it to Dilly. If he confirms it, we've got something solid." Martha took a slow breath, weighing the danger. "If the sheriff sees me..." "He won't. You'll go early before the salon opens." "Dilly's a morning man." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right. But if I don't come back by sundown, you will," he said, firm but gentle. "You've got more grit than most men I've known." She met his eyes, and for the first time she let herself hold his gaze. There was strength there and something else, a quiet promise she didn't dare name. That afternoon, while Caleb cleaned his gun and checked the barn doors, Martha prepared for the trip. She tore a page from the ledger and tucked it inside her coat. Before leaving, she looked back at him. "Lock the door behind me," she said. "I will." "And Martha," he paused, "don't trust anyone till you're sure." She nodded and stepped out into the cold. The ride to town was long and silent. The snow crunched under her horse's hooves, each breath turning to mist in the air. Pine Hollow's main street looked half asleep when she arrived. Storefronts shuttered, smoke rising from a few chimneys. She hitched her horse behind the mercantile and walked to Sam Dilly's workshop. The old man was already at his bench polishing a scale. His hands were steady, though his eyes squinted through thick lenses. "Martha Ellery," he said with surprise. "Ain't seen you in months. What brings you out in this cold?" "I need your help, Sam," she said quietly. "And your word it stays between us." He studied her face, then nodded. "All right." She took out the folded paper and slid it to him. "You recognize these numbers?" He adjusted his glasses, reading slowly. "These are freight tallies. But they're wrong. The dates don't match what I wrote. And this here," he pointed to the sheriff's name, "that's strange. Briggs never handled freight money directly. That was Eli's job." Her heart sank. "So these are real?" "Real enough to hang a man," Sam said softly. "You best be careful, Martha. If Briggs finds out you've got this..." Footsteps sounded on the porch outside, heavy, slow. Martha's stomach twisted. Sam looked toward the door, eyes wide. The latch lifted. Sheriff Briggs stepped in, dusting snow from his coat. His badge glinted under the lamplight. "Mornin', folks," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Didn't expect to find you two having a chat." Martha forced a calm tone. "Just asking Sam about supplies. My feeds run low." Briggs looked at the paper in Sam's hand. "That so?" Sam froze. His hand trembled slightly. "Just a receipt." Briggs took a step forward. "Mind if I see it?" Martha's heart raced. "It's nothing important," she said quickly, reaching out, but Briggs's hand was faster. He snatched the paper from Sam and unfolded it. For a long moment, the only sound was the crack of the wood stove. Then Briggs's face changed. His smile vanished, replaced by cold fury. "Well," he said quietly, "looks like you've been doing some digging." Martha stood tall, though her knees shook. "You framed an innocent man, Sheriff." He tucked the page into his coat. "You let me worry about that." Then he turned to Sam. "You didn't see a thing, you hear? And if I hear you've been talking out of turn..." Sam nodded quickly, eyes down. Briggs looked back at Martha. "You tell that cowboy of yours his time's run out." He stepped outside, slamming the door hard behind him. Martha's breath trembled. Sam whispered, "You'd best ride, girl. He'll come for you both." She didn't waste another second. She ran for her horse and rode hard into the frozen hills, the wind cutting her face as fear and fury drove her faster toward home. The sun was low when Martha reached her homestead again. The snow was half melted, turning the trail to slush. Her horse blew steam from its nostrils. Tired from the hard ride, she could see the thin smoke from the barn's chimney and felt a wave of relief. Caleb was still there. She dismounted fast, boots splashing through puddles. The barn door opened before she could reach it. Caleb stood there, pale but alert, his gun at his side. "You're late," he said, voice steady but worried. "Briggs found me." His eyes hardened. "You all right?" She nodded, breathless. "He knows." He took the page. "Said he's coming for us," Caleb cursed under his breath. "Then we've got no time." He helped her inside, closing the door tight. The firelight flickered over their faces as she told him everything. How she'd gone to Sam Dilly. How Briggs had shown up. How his temper had turned cold as the wind outside. When she finished, Caleb was quiet. He stared into the fire a long time before speaking. "He won't just come for the book. He'll come to finish what he started." Martha's hand shook as she poured water into a tin cup. "I don't want blood on this land again." "Neither do I," Caleb said softly. "But if we don't fight, he'll hang me and call you a liar." She looked at him, her eyes tired but fierce. "Then we fight smart." Not loud, he nodded slowly. "I can set a trap. If Briggs wants to find me, we'll make sure he does, right here. But we'll have proof waiting when he does." Martha frowned. "Proof?" "Dilly's still alive," Caleb said. "And I bet he's scared. If you can get him to write a statement, something that matches what's in that ledger, we can hand it to a federal marshal in Deadwood. They'll take Briggs down." Her heart pounded. "But Briggs won't let me ride that far. He'll be watching." "Then I'll draw him off," Caleb said simply. "He's hunting me, not you. I'll lead him away while you ride for Deadwood." Martha shook her head sharply. "You're half-healed. You won't make it 10 miles, he smiled faintly. "I've made it farther with worse." "You'll die out there," she said, voice breaking. Caleb's gaze softened. "Maybe, but at least it'd mean something." "I can't keep running, Martha. I've got to end it." She turned away, her throat tight. Outside, the wind had begun to rise again, the trees moaning under its weight. "You're not going alone," she said finally. He stepped closer. "You've got more to live for than I do." She faced him, her eyes bright in the firelight. "And you've got something to live for now, too." For a moment, neither spoke. The fire popped. A long silence stretched between them, soft, heavy, full of things neither dared to say aloud. Finally, Caleb looked down. "All right. We both ride, but we do it before sunrise. Briggs won't expect it." Martha nodded. "I'll pack what we need." They worked quietly through the night. Martha filled saddlebags with bread, jerky, and the rest of the coffee beans. Caleb cleaned his revolver and loaded it slowly, every click echoing through the barn. When he straightened, she saw how tired he was, but he didn't complain. Before dawn, they stood by the horses, ready. The sky was pale gray, the horizon still dark with the last stars. Martha tucked the ledger deep into her saddlebag. Caleb looked at her, his breath misting in the cold. "If we don't make it," she cut him off. "We will." He gave a small nod, then swung into his saddle with a quiet grunt of pain. Martha mounted beside him. For a moment they just sat there, the silence of the frozen land stretching wide around them. Then Caleb said, "When this is over, if we live through it, maybe we can find somewhere warm. Start again." Martha looked at him and her voice was barely a whisper. "I'd like that." They turned their horses toward the east, toward Deadwood, and toward whatever waited on the road ahead. But even as they rode, a dark shape moved through the trees behind them. 3 riders, silent as ghosts, following their trail. Briggs was already coming. The morning sky over Pine Hollow was the color of ash. The snow had hardened overnight, crisp beneath the horses' hooves. Martha rode close behind Caleb, her breath showing in quick white clouds. Neither spoke much, the cold bit too deep, and both knew the danger wasn't far behind. Caleb glanced back often, scanning the tree line. They'll follow our tracks, he said quietly. Briggs rides hard when he's cornered. Martha gripped the reins tighter. Then we'll make sure he finds something he doesn't expect. They crossed the frozen creek, its surface cracking faintly under the horses. The forest beyond was still, silent, but watchful. Caleb led them up a narrow ridge that overlooked the valley. From there they could see the long road snaking toward Deadwood, glinting faintly under the weak morning sun. We'll make camp here a bit, he said. Rest the horses. Let them think we're headed east before we cut south. Martha nodded. She dismounted, her legs stiff from the ride. She knelt near a rock, brushing snow away to uncover dry grass for the fire. Caleb helped, his movements slow but steady. When the flames caught, their light danced over his face, stern but calm. You ride hard for Deadwood once we split, he said. Find the marshal's office near the freight yard. Show him that ledger. Don't stop for anyone. She looked at him, her hands trembling slightly. And what about you? I'll lead Briggs west into the ravine. He'll think he's got me trapped, but I know a cut through the canyon wall. Once he follows, I'll double back. Martha shook her head. That's madness. You'll get yourself killed, he smiled faintly. Wouldn't be the first time someone tried. She reached out, catching his arm. Caleb, you don't have to do this alone. He met her eyes. I do. He won't stop till he's got me dead, or till someone stands up to him. I owe it to Eli, and to you. Her chest tightened. She wanted to tell him not to go, to stay and fight beside her, but she saw the truth in his eyes. He had already made peace with the risk. Before she could speak, Caleb suddenly froze. Riders, he whispered. From the ridge below, the faint echo of hooves reached them. 3 dark figures were cutting through the snow, heading straight their way. It's Briggs, Caleb said, grabbing his rifle. They're closer than I thought. Martha's pulse quickened. What do we do? He scanned the land, thinking fast. There's a hollow near the cliff edge. Take your horse down there, stay low. When they come up the ridge, I'll draw them off. I'm not hiding while you fight, she said sharply. You have to, he said. If they get that ledger, all this is for nothing. For a long second they stared at each other, snow swirling between them, breath quick in the cold air. Finally Martha nodded, though her heart ached. Don't get yourself killed, she whispered. He gave her a faint grin. I'll try not to. She guided her horse down toward the hollow while Caleb took position behind a cluster of rocks. He checked his revolver, loaded one last bullet, and waited. The sound of hooves grew louder. Then the riders appeared, Briggs in front, his coat flapping, his face dark with fury. 2 deputies followed close behind. Rourke! Briggs shouted. End of the trail, boy. Come out and I'll make it quick. Caleb didn't answer. He steadied his aim. When Briggs took another step forward, Caleb fired. The shot echoed through the mountains, sharp and sudden. One deputy's hat flew off, his horse rearing. Briggs cursed and ducked behind a tree. Spread out, he barked. He's here somewhere! The second deputy spurred left, circling wide. Caleb ducked as a bullet struck the rock near his head, spraying stone chips across his cheek. He returned fire, hitting the man's shoulder. The deputy cried out and fell from his horse. Martha crouched low in the hollow, clutching the reins. Every gunshot made her flinch, her stomach twisting in fear. She wanted to run to him, but she knew if she moved now, they'd both die. Caleb fired again, but his last bullet clicked empty. Briggs heard it. He rose from cover, smiling coldly. Out of rounds, Rourke? Caleb tossed the revolver aside and reached for his rifle, but the snow made his hands slow. Briggs fired first. The bullet grazed his side, tearing through the coat. Caleb dropped to one knee, gritting his teeth. Briggs moved closer, gun still raised. You should have stayed buried in that snow, boy. Would have saved you the pain. Caleb forced himself up, blood on his sleeve. You'll hang for what you did, Briggs laughed. Ain't no one left to tell the tale. But he didn't see Martha step from behind the ridge, the rifle shaking in her hands. Her voice cut through the cold. There's one left, Sheriff. Briggs turned, shocked. The next sound was a single thunderous shot. Smoke drifted over the ridge, hanging in the cold air like a ghost. The echo of the gunshot faded into silence, leaving only the wind. Martha stood trembling, the rifle heavy in her hands. Briggs lay in the snow a few yards away, his gun dropped beside him, the red stain spreading beneath his coat. Caleb stared, his chest heaving. He stumbled toward her, gripping his side. You shot him." Her voice shook. "He would have killed you." He nodded once, steadying himself on a rock. "You saved my life." "I couldn't just watch," she whispered, lowering the rifle. Her hand shook so badly she nearly dropped it. He caught her wrist gently. "It's over now." But it wasn't. Behind them, one of Briggs's deputies groaned, pushing himself up from the snow, wounded but alive. Caleb turned fast, aiming his rifle, but the man didn't reach for his gun. He just stared at Briggs's still body, his face pale. "You killed the sheriff," the deputy said weakly. Caleb's voice was low but steady. He wasn't a sheriff anymore. He was a thief and a murderer. The deputy looked at Martha, then at the ledger tied to her saddle. "That's the proof?" She nodded. "It shows every man he paid off, every job he covered, including the one my husband took part in." The deputy swallowed hard, then lowered his gaze. Maybe it's time somebody told the truth. He picked up Briggs's gun and tossed it aside. "I'll ride to town. Tell the marshal what happened. You two should get him to a doctor." Caleb nodded, grateful but wary. "You'd do that?" "Briggs made me lie for him once," the man said. "Guess I've been waiting to make it right." With that, he climbed onto his horse and rode off into the gray horizon, the sound of hooves fading into the distance. Martha turned to Caleb. He was leaning on the rock again, blood seeping through his coat. She hurried to him, tearing a strip from her shawl to press against the wound. "Hold still," she said softly. "It's not deep, but it's bleeding bad." He winced but didn't pull away. "You've got steady hands for someone shaking so much." She managed a small smile. "Fear keeps them steady." He laughed weakly. "That's a new one." They stayed there for a long moment, the snow falling gently around them, covering the chaos that had just unfolded. Finally, Caleb looked toward the valley. "We should move. The storm's letting up, and once word spreads, more men will come." Martha nodded, helping him to his feet. They mounted their horses slowly, Caleb's movement stiff, every breath labored. As they rode down the ridge, the first light of the afternoon broke through the clouds. It shone pale gold on the frozen trees, turning the world soft again like nothing cruel had ever happened there. Martha looked back once. The ridge was empty now, only the snow to mark where Briggs had fallen. "Do you think the marshal will believe us?" she asked quietly. Caleb's voice came faint but sure. "That ledger's the truth. Might take time, but truth's got a way of standing when everything else falls." They rode in silence for miles, the sound of hooves muffled in the snow. When they finally reached the main trail, Caleb began to sway in the saddle. "Caleb," Martha said quickly, "stay awake. We're almost there," he tried to smile. "If I pass out, promise you'll keep riding." "I'm not leaving you," she said, firm now. "You hear me? Not after all this." He gave a slow nod, eyes half closed. "You're as stubborn as a mule," she squeezed the reins. "Takes one to know one." By the time they reached the edge of Pine Hollow, the sky had turned gold with evening. Smoke rose from the chimneys, soft and curling. Martha guided him toward the doctor's cabin at the edge of town. As she helped him down from his horse, his knees buckled. She caught him before he fell, holding him close. "Easy," she whispered. "You're home now." His voice was barely a breath. "You sure this feels like home?" She met his eyes. "It does when you're in it." The door swung open and the doctor came running out, startled by the sight. "Lord above, what happened?" "Bullet wound," Martha said. "He needs help fast." As they carried him inside, the last light faded from the sky. The fire crackled to life, warm and golden, spilling over the walls. Martha stood beside the bed while the doctor worked, refusing to step away. Outside, the wind howled faintly, then began to die. The storm that had brought Caleb to her door was gone at last, and though the night still pressed cold against the windows, Something inside her heart began to thaw. The next morning, the snow outside the doctor's cabin glittered under a soft blue sky. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the town of Pine Hollow stirred slowly back to life after days of storm. Inside, the air was warm, filled with the quiet sound of a fire crackling and a man's slow, even breathing. Caleb lay on the bed, pale but alive. His shoulder was bandaged tight, his chest rising and falling steadily now. Martha sat beside him, her hands folded on her lap. She hadn't slept much. Every few minutes through the night she had checked his pulse, his breath, the warmth of his skin. When his eyes finally opened, weak but clear, she let out a sound between a sigh and a laugh. "You scared me near to death," she said softly. He blinked, his lips curving faintly. "Wouldn't be the first time, I reckon." She poured him a bit of water and held the cup to his lips. "The doctor says you'll heal fine if you rest. But you won't if you keep talking." He took a slow sip, then set his head back on the pillow. "Briggs?" "Gone," she answered. "The deputy rode to Deadwood last night with the ledger. Said he'd see the marshal himself." Caleb closed his eyes, relief washing over his face. "Then it's over." Martha looked into the fire. "Maybe not all of it. Folks'll talk. Some might still believe you're guilty." He shrugged slightly. "Let them. I'm done running." The room fell quiet for a long while. The only sound was the low hum of wind outside. Martha reached out, adjusting the blanket around his shoulders. "You shouldn't have come back for me that night," she said quietly. "You could have left and been safe." He turned his head toward her. "You think I could have ridden off knowing they'd come for you next?" She hesitated. "I could have managed," he smiled faintly. "You could have, but I didn't want you to have to." Something in her chest ached at his words. She looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're a fool, Caleb Rourke." He chuckled weakly. "That's what they all say." Later that day, a knock came at the door. Martha rose, careful not to wake him, and opened it to find the deputy from the ridge standing there. His arm was wrapped in a sling, but he looked cleaner, calmer. "Ma'am," he said with a respectful nod. "Marshal sent me." He read the ledger. "Briggs's men are being rounded up as we speak. Rourke's name is cleared." Martha's hand flew to her mouth. "Truly?" He nodded. "Marshal says Rourke's a free man now. Reckon he's earned that peace." Her eyes filled with quiet tears. "Thank you." The deputy gave her a small, kind smile. "Thank him when he wakes up. I'll be heading back to Deadwood, but I'll tell the marshal he survived." She watched him ride away through the snowy street, then closed the door softly. Inside, the warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. Caleb stirred again, his voice low. "Who was it?" She smiled. "Good news for once. You're a free man." He stared at her, almost not believing it. "Free?" She nodded. "Marshal cleared your name. The whole town will know soon." Caleb let out a shaky laugh. "Guess I don't know what to do with that." Martha sat down beside him. "Maybe start by healing, then maybe you'll figure it out." He looked at her for a long moment, something soft and steady in his eyes. "You're shaking again," he said. She gave a little laugh, rubbing her hands together. "That's just habit now." He reached out, weak but certain, and took her hand. "Don't be afraid anymore, Martha. You've got no reason left." She wanted to believe that. But part of her still feared what came next, what life looked like after loss, after danger. Yet when she looked at him, she saw something she hadn't seen in years, a reason to hope. That evening, when the doctor said Caleb would live, Martha stepped outside for the first time since the storm. The snow had begun to melt under a pale sunset, water dripping from the eaves like slow music. She looked at the sky and whispered a quiet prayer, not just of thanks, but of release. Behind her, through the open door, Caleb's voice called softly, "Martha?" She turned. He smiled faintly from the bed, one hand outstretched. "Don't stand in the cold too long." She walked back inside, closing the door behind her. The firelight caught in her hair as she sat down again. For the first time in a long time, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt like home. Days passed and the snow around Pine Hollow began to soften under the touch of spring. The once frozen creek now murmured with running water, and the sun stayed longer in the sky each evening. Inside Martha's cabin, the smell of stew filled the air. She moved quietly between the stove and the table, setting down 2 bowls. Caleb sat near the hearth, his arm still wrapped but healing. His color had returned, and though he still winced when he moved too fast, the strength in his shoulders was back. He watched her for a moment before speaking. "Never thought I'd live long enough to sit in peace and smell real food again." Martha smiled softly without turning. "You'll have plenty of that if you keep your promises." He raised an eyebrow. "Promises? You said you'd rest. That means no chopping wood, no fixing fences, and no sneaking out to the barn." He chuckled. "You've been watching me too closely." "That's because you're a terrible patient," she said, bringing him his bowl. He took it, their fingers brushing for just a second, enough to make them both still. Then Martha sat opposite him and they ate quietly, the only sounds the fire and the faint wind outside. After a while, Caleb set his spoon down. "Marshall's letter came this morning," he said. "Said Briggs' men confessed everything. Your husband's name cleared too." Martha froze for a moment. "Cleared?" He nodded. "Turns out Briggs used him the same as he used me. Paid him to haul gold that was already stolen, then blamed him when things went wrong." Martha's eyes lowered. "All this time I thought he'd chosen that path." "Maybe he didn't have a choice," Caleb said softly. "But you do. You can start again." She looked up at him. "Start what exactly?" He leaned forward, voice low but sure. "Whatever life you want, Martha Ellery. One that's not built on grief or guilt." Her throat tightened. "And what about you?" He gave a small smile. "I've been running from ghosts for years. Maybe it's time I stop." She searched his face, quiet for a long moment. "You mean stay?" He looked into the fire. "If you'd have me." Silence filled the room again, heavy but warm. The kind of silence that meant something unspoken was finding its place. Martha rose and went to the window. Outside, the sun was slipping behind the hills, painting the snow in gold. The same hills she'd watched alone for years. She turned back to him. "You came here half dead in a storm," she said softly. "And now you're sitting in my home, eating my stew, talking about staying." He tilted his head. "Is that a complaint?" She shook her head slowly. "No, it's a miracle." Caleb stood, a little unsteady but determined. He crossed the room to her side, the firelight catching the faint scar along his jaw. "Then maybe we shouldn't question it too much." She looked up at him, her breath catching. "You sure you're ready to stop wandering?" He smiled, tired, honest, full of something she hadn't seen before. "I think I found what I was looking for." The wind brushed softly against the window, and the last light of day touched both their faces. He took her hands gently in his. "You saved me, Martha, not just from Briggs, but from the life I was living." Her eyes glistened. "You gave me something too, Caleb. You made this house feel alive again." He stepped closer. "Then maybe we can keep it that way." She nodded once, unable to speak. He brushed a strand of hair from her face and whispered, "I ain't leaving you ever again." The words hung in the air, simple and steady as a vow. Outside, the wind calmed. The horizon glowed soft orange, fading into the quiet blue of evening. Inside, the fire burned low, wrapping them in its golden light. And for the first time since the storm began, there was peace. No fear, no running, just the steady rhythm of 2 hearts finding home in each other. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more tales of love, loss, and redemption from the Old West. Hit that like button to help others find it. And tell us in the comments, would you have trusted the stranger in the storm?